I turned a dark, dirty, dingy, and depressing one-car garage in military housing into a bright, comfortable, and highly functional textile studio. If you want to see how I did it, keep watching and I'll show you. Hi, I'm Angie, a mixed media textile artist currently residing in Kentucky. My husband and I recently moved to Kentucky to be closer to our daughter and our grandson. Our daughter is a single mom in the Army, and for the past 10 years, we've traveled back and forth from Florida to wherever she's at to help take care of the grandkid whenever she's deployed or went TDY or went on field training exercises. And we just decided it would be easier all around if we lived closer to her. So we decided to move to wherever she's at and to follow her wherever she goes until her military career is over. Now, when I was in Kentucky in January, while she was away at a field training exercise, I applied to run a house on the military installation. Now, my application was accepted, but a house wasn't available until I returned back to Florida. So our daughter, she took care of all the walkthrough, the approval of the house. And while the house itself more than met our needs, the garage where my studio was going to be was a little bit suspect. Here's a video she sent me expressing her concerns about the garage.
All right, now let's go into what you really care about, the garage. I'm not gonna lie, Mommy, I don't think you're gonna like it for what you want to do. It's really dark. There's drywall on a quarter of this wall and this wall and a little bit of this wall. The rest does not have drywall, and I asked them if they can put in drywall. They said only if there's a medical reason, and I asked them if you can put up your own drywall, and they said no. This is the only light in the garage, and it doesn't look like it's going to be really easy to put in lighting up here at all. I don't know. And then you have some cutout shelves over here already built in. Try to give you as much of a view as possible for the garage. It looks a little more narrow than mine. Yeah, it's more narrow than mine, just by a little bit, I would say. But you do have this cutout. But I would honestly say because of the lighting and because of the fact that you can't put drywall up, I don't know how you feel about this.
Now, I returned to Kentucky in April because she had another field training exercise. So I had 3 weeks to kind of put my studio together. So what I did when I figured I was going to be there for 3 weeks, we did a partial shipment and shipped my studio from Florida to Kentucky so that I could work on it during that time. So while the kid was away at school during the day, I was busy working on the studio. But first, I had to overcome some serious issues. The first one was it was only partially finished. About half the garage in total was bare studs. So before I got back in April, my daughter and her boyfriend installed some beadboard paneling over those bare studs area for me. That saved me a lot of work. And it really wasn't that expensive because the management company, they wouldn't let me put up drywall and they wouldn't put up drywall for me. So the beadboard was a easy alternative and it was something that we could take down when it was time to leave. The second issue was the lack of electrical outlets. The garage only had 3 electrical outlets and only one was within easy reach. So here's a video that my daughter sent showing where the electrical outlets were. And I'm going to apologize for the different orientation, but at the time she didn't realize I'd be using these videos for filming and she filmed them in vertical orientation instead of horizontal. But take a look at this and you'll see the challenge that I had with the lack of electrical outlets. And not only the lack, but also the location of these electrical outlets.
Okay, so walking in, this over here is your outlet. I already checked, made sure it worked. And then going up, it focuses. There's your outlet that the garage door is utilizing, and if you see right over here, this is your outlet that I'm not sure what's being utilized there, but it's over here, just to pan out and give you a view of where it's at. And then those are the only outlets. Unfortunately, there's none behind the dumpsters.
So to solve the outlet problem, I found these outlets on Amazon that were 50 feet and 35 feet. And I don't remember which one I purchased, but they had outlets spaced about every 4 feet along the length of the cord. And these I've discovered were used in convention centers for conferences, for concerts, and that type of thing. So I thought they would be fairly safe for my studio because I don't have a heavy load. All I have is my machines and lighting and iron. My irons are the heaviest load. So I knew these would be fairly safe. My daughter's boyfriend was able to put one way up in the highest point of the ceiling for me when they did the beadboard. But silly me, somehow managed to pull that thing out of the wall or out of the outlet while I was working there. So I had to work around that. So while I was there in April, I painted the remaining walls. And let me tell you, these walls had not seen paint probably since the house was built. So one wall didn't look like it had any paint on it, but whatever the finish was on it, it started flaking off when I started painting. And first I thought, maybe I'll scrape down these walls. Then I thought, this isn't that kind of place. So I just kept on painting, rolling it on, letting it flake off every which way it could and get back into the paint on the wall. And now I have textured walls. So I'm okay with it. It's not that kind of a place. For lighting, I chose some very, very lightweight LED lights that I found on Amazon, and the reviews on these were very good. They're very bright, they're very lightweight, and the best thing about them, they daisy chain together. So right now I have 3 of them daisy chained together and 1 single. And the best thing about it is the 3 that are daisy chained together, I only had to use up one of my outlets on that cord, and they are very bright. This garage went from like night and day with those lights. So I'm really, really happy with that solution. Now, I've talked about all of the bad features about this garage, but it did have one good feature. It had this built-in nook that was created by a little storage room from the outside and the bathroom, the powder room on the downstairs level. And the nook is about 5 feet by 5 feet, and it had built-in shelves. And because of that nook, I knew that I could make this garage work. It's the main storage area in the garage, and it's a workhorse, which you will see later. Okay, enough of that. Let me show you some of the work in progress. And I didn't take nearly enough photos and videos of this, mainly because once I start working, I forget all about that. But I do have some photos to show you of the progress of putting together the studio. So let's just take a look at some of those, and I'll give you a little talk about what's going on. My husband built all of the tables for the studio. He pre-built them in Florida, took them apart so we could ship them flat, and I had to put them back together on the Kentucky end. And it really wasn't that hard. It's very simple construction, and he made it pretty easy for me. He had everything marked and pre-drilled. All I had to do was screw things back together. So I'm capable of doing that, and I think I did a pretty good job. So this garage is very long and narrow, and my daughter was able to give me some detailed measurements before I came back in April, and I was able to create several floor plans on the computer and figure out the best layout for the space, and that saved me a lot of time when I came back in April. I didn't have to put things in place and shuffle them around much. So the garage is very long and narrow. It's about 10.5 feet wide, not including the nook, and 20 feet wide. So it's like a train car. But along one wall, I have all of my sewing machines, and I have 4 sewing machines set up. I know I can't use 4 at a time, but I really wanted all my machines set up. And in the middle of the space, I have 2 3-foot by 6-foot tables. One's used for pressing and one used for cutting, and I have a cutting mat on that. And the other wall, I have storage. So one wall is mostly storage, and the nook is all storage. So I put everything together in those 3 weeks. Well, not everything. I got a lot of work done in those 3 weeks. I got the basics of the studio put together. I had all the major pieces in place. So when we came back in mid-May, I knew I was going to have to work on the house first. I was going to have to get the house set up before I could come back into the studio. And having all the major pieces in place was a really big help. First, here is an overview of the studio. It's a very long and narrow space, about 10.5 feet wide by 20 feet long. Okay, now let's do that just a little slower and I'll go into a little more detail. Right in front of the door, facing the door, is my Tin Lizzie, which is my sit-down quilting machine. And underneath that, I have a small little storage drawer. I found this at a thrift store. I believe it's a nightstand or end table. And then the top drawer, I have some metal leaf and just some other items that I don't have any other place to put. The bottom drawer is where I store some of my smaller pieces of rust fabric. And I chose not to put these upstairs in the hopes that I'll get around to using them soon. On the wall to the left of the Tin Lizzie is my design wall, which is simply foam insulation covered in felt. To the left of the design wall, I've hung some textile art and art quotes from some of my favorite artists. Behind the Tin Lizzie is my serger, and it's just sitting on a folding TV tray. Don't need a lot of room for this. And I just added a rug gripper pad to keep it from sliding around. Next to the serger is my FAF 1475 number 1. I've had this machine since 1991. I purchased it when we were stationed overseas in Italy, and it's still my favorite machine. It's traveled all over the world with me. I wish I could get frequent flyer miles for it. And about a couple years ago, it died on me, and I discovered that the motherboard was dead. I didn't have the heart to throw it away, and I kept doing some research, and I eventually found that it needed 2 capacitors to be replaced. Now, it had been a long time since I'd done any soldering or any type of electronics work like that, so I didn't feel qualified to do it, but I found a friend who did it for me, and for the cost of several dollars and a donation that I made to him because he wouldn't charge me, I had my beloved machine back in service again. Okay, and here is FAF 1475 number 2. I love this machine so much that a few years ago, an acquaintance who I tried to teach how to sew, but she never did take to it and she didn't like it. I had helped her purchase this machine, and when she decided to give up on sewing, she asked me if I wanted to buy it, and you know, I was all over that. So now I have 2 beloved FAF 1475s. Underneath FAF number 1, I have a small storage unit from IKEA. It's from the kids department. It's called a Trofast, and it's really just to store things that I like to have close to the machine. These are mostly practice pieces that whenever I feel I want to practice some free motion stitching, I can just grab them and go. In between the machines, I have a plastic 3-drawer unit that I like to use to keep bobbins, sewing machine manuals, chalk, marking tools, or any other items that I like to have close by the machine, but not on the machine table. Now, in between machines number 2 and 3, I placed this tall storage unit, which is actually 2 units stacked on top of each other and secured to the wall. These are from IKEA kids department, and they're part of the Trofast collection. What I like about these are the pull-out bins with lids that help keep everything contained and clean and dust-free. On top of the Trofast, I have my collection of irons. I love to collect old irons, And it's funny, I recently had a young lady that I met here on the installation over and showed her my place, and she wondered why I had so many irons. Did I really need to use all of those? And no, they're just part of my collection. Machine number 3 is a Singer featherweight that I picked up at a garage sale. So let me tell you the story behind this. I'd been wanting a featherweight, and a friend of mine knew this, and she saw it at a garage sale and said it and called me and said, "Angie, it's there for about $200." So I jumped in my car and ran over, and there it was. I asked the lady how much, and she said $175. Now I tried not to look too excited about it, but I sat down on the ground and I was looking through the owner's manual, and it showed a table with it that was made for the featherweight. I asked her if she had the table, and she says, "Oh yeah, I forgot about that." Well, it turns out that this wasn't her machine. She recently married this gentleman, and his mother passed away, and they were having this garage sale. So she went and got the table for me. I got the table and the machine for $175. I had no need for the table. I didn't have room for it, and I really didn't want it. So I put it on Craigslist for $100, and it was snapped up immediately. So in effect, I paid $75 for a Singer featherweight in perfect condition. My last sewing machine is a Bernina 731. So this is one of those old school Berninas, heavy as all get out. And there's another story to go with this. In my slipcover business, I had a client that I did a lot of work for, and she decided she was moving to Arizona and wasn't going to take this sewing machine. And she just gave it to me. Didn't want any money for it. Says she knew it would find a good home with me, and now I have a Bernina 731. And just like in between the other two sets of machines, I have another one of these 3-drawer units where I keep bobbins, instruction manuals, or any other things that will go with the two machines. Also, I want to show you this. To the right of each machine, I've placed a small metal silverware drawer, and this holds things like seam rippers, rulers, screwdrivers, and pins, etc. They are actually screwed to the table through the tile. I know that puts a hole in the tile, but I really like having these silverware drawers with these items in it. I don't like having cups or anything like that I can knock over, because if you know me in real life, you'll know that I am a major klutz, so it needs to be attached to the table. Another thing I do is I like to use cone threads with my machines, and they don't fit on the regular thread holder on the machine. So I attach a commercial thread holder to each table for each machine. I purchased these online, and I will have a link down in the description below. This is a 2-thread stand, and it allows me to use those cone threads that I like to use. Above each machine, I've placed these small little shelf ledges, or ledge shelves, or whichever way you want to call it, that I purchased from Amazon, and I will put a link down below. I didn't want to put a lot on the wall above the shelves. I didn't want to have cabinets or shelves going all the way to the ceiling, because this is a very narrow room, and I didn't want it to feel closed in. But I needed something at each machine so that I could put frequently used items, and these shelves are just perfect for it. Instead of placing shelves or cabinets above the machines, I decided to place just a few pieces of my finished or semi-finished pieces of art or pieces of fabric that I've created that I just love. In the middle of the long, narrow room, I placed my long, narrow work tables. These are 2 work tables, 3 feet by 6 feet. One is used for pressing and printing, and the other one is used as a cutting table. I really wanted to place these tables perpendicular to the walls, but no matter how I tried it and my layouts on the computer, I just couldn't get it to work to make the best use of the space. The table closest to the door is the printing and pressing table, and for this table I added 2 layers of felt and then a plain cotton white cover and then this striped ticking cover. I did that because I can take the ticking cover off and wash it if I need to and still use the table because it has that plain white cover on it. Under the pressing table, I have a small TV stand which holds works in progress, and another small 3-drawer unit made up of leftovers from the others. These came as 4 drawers, but only 3 would fit under the table, so I had some left. On the other side of the cutting table, the printing table, I have some more storage, some miscellaneous storage. I'm really not happy with this area. I'm looking for some better storage options, and I know this area will change pretty soon because it's just not working right now. Now for the cutting table, I had a custom size cutting mat made, and it's kind of a weird one. I didn't realize it when I was purchasing it. This mat is just plain transparent, and I had to buy a second mat to go under it for the grid. I didn't realize it was going to be in 2 pieces, otherwise I probably would have found something else, but I have it, it works, and it will cost me more to send it back. Under the cutting table, I have another IKEA Trofast unit from the kids department, this time in a shorter version. I really do like these. They're one of my favorite pieces from IKEA, and I don't think a lot of people think to look in the kids department. They have some really good storage ideas, so you might want to check that out. Under the cutting table, I have a salvaged drawer that I use to hold items that I need at the cutting table, such as my rotary cutter, rulers, chalk, and other items. Also on this side of the cutting table, I have this large metal garbage can, and this is where I store products that I use to create resist when I'm printing or dyeing, such as sodium alginate and different types of flours that I use as a resist for printing and dyeing. On the other side of the cutting table, I have a 6-drawer IKEA dresser. I purchased this before I left Florida and shipped it with me, and I had intended to purchase more, but they were all out of stock. And I'm really happy they were, because this is the worst piece of IKEA furniture I've ever purchased. It was very difficult to put together. One of the pieces of wood split as I was working on it, and I had to glue everything back together and pray that it would stay together. So I'm really happy they only had one. At the end of the cutting table, I have an IKEA cart, and this is where I will store printing supplies when I'm printing. So I'll put my squeegees here, my spatulas, some towels, and some rags, and the clothing that I wear when I'm printing. In between the tables, I have another IKEA cart, and this is for my ironing supplies. I keep my EuroPro iron on the top shelf. In the middle shelf, I just have some ironing supplies, and on the bottom shelf, I just keep a collection of regular irons. I try to use a different iron when I'm working with fusible, but that doesn't always happen that way. Now let's take a look at the final wall of the room, and this is the real storage workhorse of the room. Over near the garage door, there's a small section of wall, about 3.5 feet, and I've placed a number of crates on that wall. I've placed them vertically and horizontally, but I've left little gaps between the crates for little pockets of storage. And I really do love these little pockets. This is a great wall. It's working out for my book storage, and down below the crates, I've placed a tall dresser and a shorter one. The taller dresser holds miscellaneous notions, such as my supplies for doing color stories, elastic, hook and loop tape, zippers, and other items. This shorter dresser, which I found on the side of the road, and I think it's a file drawer, it holds some printing and dyeing supplies in the top drawer, and in the bottom drawer, it holds my professional gravity feed irons that I had left over from my slipcover days. Now we're going to take a look at the nook. And if it wasn't for this nook, I don't think I would have accepted this house, because the garage would not have worked. This nook provides a ton of storage space for me. And this is the real workhorse of the studio. This nook is working out really great for storage of my paints and other wet media. And I like having it back here segregated from the rest of the studio so that I don't accidentally get paint or any other dyes or anything like that on fabric when I don't intend to put it on the fabric. One of my favorite storage solutions in the nook is this over-the-door organizer that I hung on some hooks instead of hanging it over the door. I like the clear pockets so that I can see what's in it. And it also has pockets on the side that I can hang or put additional items. And I have more crates over here. I really do love these crates on the wall. Now, under the built-in shelves, there is space for some dressers. Underneath the over-the-door organizer, I have a dresser, and this stores printing and dyeing supplies. I have containers and squeegee bottles and clamps and wood pieces to fold and clamp the fabric and other things that I use when dyeing fabric. Sitting on top of the dresser is my thermofax machine. This is a very old machine, and a lot of textile artists use it to create screens, and tattoo artists use it also. They're very difficult to find, they're very expensive, and I didn't trust the movers with this, so this baby came in the car with us. The final area of the studio is a TV wall and more storage, so let's take a look at that right now. So the TV sits on a multi-drawer metal part storage thingy, and I've had this for a number of years, but it's always been an industrial gunmetal gray color. And that's fine for a garage, but not for my studio. So I painted it turquoise, and I like it much better. These drawers are perfect for a lot of small items. I have a small collection of tools, some of my video camera equipment, needles and bobbins, and the bobbins are all separated by machine. Each machine gets its own drawer, and just a lot of different small items that would be hard to store otherwise. Down beneath the turquoise drawers, I have these anchor thread drawers, and I purchased these from a store that sold used store fixtures. I used to have 3, but now I used to have 5, and I gave 3 away because I knew I wouldn't have space for all of them, so I only have these 2. And they are perfect for storing my small spools of quilting threads. So one drawer is dedicated to quilting threads, and the other drawer is dedicated to papers and miscellaneous stuff like that I use in mixed media projects. The rest of this wall is dedicated to just some nice items that I like to have in my studio. So here I have a couple catalogs where some of my art was featured in an exhibit. And the first one was called The Artist's Question Answered in Fiber. And the second one is Fresh Fish. Now the black cabinet that the coffee pot and a lot of my knickknacks sit on is a kitchen island that I purchased from Home Depot online. I needed something with deep drawers to store my cone threads. And this has 6 deep drawers, and they're full of my quilting threads and my general sewing threads. It also has 2 shallow drawers, and one holds miscellaneous thread items, and the other one holds my scissors. Now when I showed my husband this, he just thought I was a little too anal, but I like being able to keep my scissors this way instead of in a container, because there's less chance of them getting nicked and the tips of them getting chipped. So maybe it is a little anal, but hey, it works for me. This cabinet also has a middle door between the drawers, and this is where I store my small bolts of fusible web. This is an off-brand of fusible that I purchased at a local store. I don't know where else you can get it, but here's the brand, and I'll put the brand name of it down in the description below. To the left of the TV is what I call my I Love Me wall, and it's where I store some of my favorite pictures of me, a certificate from a class that I taught, a copy of a newspaper article about me, and just some of my favorite items. These are little knickknacks, and yes, I am using up some valuable space in the studio for these, but I really like looking at these items as I'm working. So I think it's important to include this type of stuff in your studio space, even if it is a small space. Now this brings us back to the entrance, but there is one last thing I want to share with you, and that's this flag banner that members of one of my art quote groups made for me as a going away gift. This is really special, and I'm so happy that I was able to find a space for it, and I can look at this. across the table when I'm working at the cutting table or depressing table, and I can look at this and I can remember all of my friends that I left behind in Florida. Okay, guys, that is it for the studio tour. I hope you enjoyed this little tour, and I hope maybe you found something that you might can use in your studio. I'm really, really happy with the way it turned out. I took this really dark, depressing place because it really was depressing, and I've turned it into a very functional studio. I've been using it for a few weeks now, and actually, my daughter, who asked me to teach her how to sew after all these years, she finally wants to learn to sew. She's been coming over and working in it, and my daughter is very fussy. Okay, she would have never took this house, let's just say that. Okay? She's very fussy, and even she said it was a nice, cozy place to work in. So if she said it, it must be true. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Tell your friends about it. And I hope to see you back here again for another video soon. Thanks for watching and bye-bye now.